Good morning. Today is the 30th of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the first day of Rosh Chodesh Iyar, and also the, I believe, 21st of April. And we're in the middle of now getting to the crux of what he wants, which is to explain exactly what does he mean exactly that the mitzvahs are higher than the Torah. This is basically the point of the Maimer so far. That commandments are higher than the Torah. In the way that he's been presenting it, the Torah is a vessel, and that vessel is filled with the infinite light of God by us performing mitzvahs, by us being nullified to God's will. And so this is a common picture, which we have in Kabbalistic thought, that wisdom is where the Torah is. And actually Torah is even the lower part of wisdom. And although Torah is everything, this is a little hard sometimes to wrap the head around. But when you talk about Torah as something that people engage with in learning, it serves as a vessel. It's not a source. And what makes it into, what fills it up with the light from the source is a performance of mitzvahs. One corollary of this would be that if a person's just studying, I think we mentioned this before, a person's studying Talmud in the academy, in the university, and he's not observant. So he's getting something out of it. I can't say that he's not getting something out of it. Even the sages say, "Halavai oti azvu v'torati shamaru." Would it be that they would leave me but keep my Torah? What are they saying? They're not saying learn my Torah. They're saying keep my Torah. So what does it mean? That if you just learn it, if you just study it, it's not the same level as if you keep it. So you get something. It's not that you don't get anything. If you keep it, then God says, would it be that they would even leave me but keep my Torah, meaning observe my Torah, observe the commandments, because the ma'ol sheba, the light, the source of light within it, will bring them back to me. So it's pretty much in a nutshell what he's saying, that the source of light comes down because we observe what the Torah says. We observe God's will. So the will is in the crown, it's higher than the Torah, which is in wisdom. So that's in a nutshell. Like what? Right. The tzon is always higher than the Torah. The tzon is in the keter. It's in the crown. But as we'll see, he's going to take this further than this. He's going to take this 2 levels higher than this, and this will take us a few more days to finish this essay, because there's really a lot of. He writes almost sometimes when I read him especially. The Rebbe Rayatz was also a little similar to him in this. They write almost offhandedly, like they're not impressed by what they're saying. They sort of say, "Oh, this is like this, like that." No big deal. But when you really think about what they're saying, they're like, especially him and the Rebbe Rayatz, it's like, wow. It really changes a lot of the perspective that we have about these very basic things that we think that we understand. I mean, how many people would think of the Torah as a vessel for the infinite light? You think that the Torah is the infinite light? No, there is a side that the Torah unifies with God, but here what he's saying is that for the Torah, in the way that we learn with our mind to contain an infinite light, that our thoughts would somehow contain something that's infinite when the thought is limited, for that you need something special. He says that's what the mitzvahs do. That's what the commandments do. And we don't appreciate enough this switch from the time of the patriarchs to the time of Moses. Like this change from a religion which was basically like every other religion, maybe, but had a different doctrine, which is that God is one, which was a very important shift. But that wasn't the end of the evolution of this religion. The big change happened at Mount Sinai when God suddenly says, keep the Sabbath, respect your parents. He has something that he wants from you. Talked about this many times. When Moses came to Egypt, that was his premise. He came and said, look, you're not just nobodies with no rights and with no personal lives, with no aspirations, with no dreams, with nothing, you are someone that God is looking at, and He wants something from you personally, the creator of the world. It's like, wow, how could that even be? Like, why would they create? Right? The whole picture of science, the whole picture of the cold mind, is that there's nothing special or different about my relationship with God and anyone else's. And here somebody comes and says, no, wait a minute. He wants you to observe this and this commandment. And that's it. It's such a powerful shift that the non-Jewish world couldn't hold on to it. So, right.
Well, it's down to the chosen people.
That's what it means to be chosen. And you know, we're coming up on, I can't not say anything about it. We're coming up on the most difficult week in Israel for people who are observant. Some people don't see the contradiction, but setting up a Jewish state which can't mention God, all the more so cannot mention commandments, not in its Declaration of Independence, not in its laws, not in anywhere. Like, what does this got to do with Judaism? The fact that we're all culturally, familially, maybe Jewish. That's very nice. That might be the case in parts of New York also. That doesn't encapsulate, that doesn't do any type of justice to what it means to actually be a Jew, which is not just to have a different culture, which means that God wants something from me. I have something that I'm required to do. That is really what differentiates us from everyone else. And if you don't have that as the inner core, the spinal column of your existence, and you're talking about some kind of folklore Judaism, which is like saying water is like wine, just because they're both fluid, they're both liquids. There's almost no resemblance. So anyway, so in all of mystical thinking, you see that in the end, the highest part of Jewish religion, in the end, is the mitzvos, is in the end the commandments. Because the type of relationship that this creates between the infinite, between God and between man, is far beyond what the mind can perceive. And most religions, at most, go all the way up to the mind. There are no obligatory performances of God's will. The will is like what happens through nature. This is what He wants. This is how we see things, and so on. But to say that He wants something from me, that He wants me to do something, not just from the stars, to circle around or to go in their in their respective ways or whatever it is. And He wants me to act like a human being in a certain way. That is the true revolutionary concept, and that's why we trace ourselves back in the end as Jews to Mount Sinai. We don't trace ourselves back and say the religion started with Abraham, because Abraham was still a place where there was no such revelation, no such revelation of God's will. But he had a partial. He had at least one commandment that he received in that way, and he was going in that direction. That's where he wanted to go. But the real change happened at Mount Sinai. Anyway, so we are now on page 9. So we are 9 lines from the bottom. No, sorry, we have to go a little bit higher. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 lines, beginning of the line. This type of nullification, which goes beyond the mind, because we said, when they said Na'aseh v'nishma, when they said we will do and we will hear, so they were nullifying themselves to the will because they had not heard any details yet. And we said before that this is a higher type of nullification than if someone comes to me and says, do so and so, and I say, okay. That's a lower form of nullification. Meaning, this nullification is nullification that comes from the crown. It's a higher form of nullification. Usually we put nullification in wisdom, this ability to nullify my will. But here it's the ability to go even higher, It's a nullification that comes from the crown. The crown also has a wisdom. It also has an aspect of a faculty of nullification to it. And so it's now nullifying to God. And this is a higher state of nullification. This is what's required. It's sort of, whenever you install like new software now or something like that, you get like a new software or something like that, you get a user agreement. And nobody reads it. So they just go, they just scroll down until you can hit, I agree. That's like Naseh v'nishma. It's like saying, whatever you want from me, I agree to it. I don't need to hear the details. The only difference is that the details are here. If you want to, you can read them. When they said Naseh v'nishma, when they said we will do and we will hear, there was no user agreement. There was nothing to scroll through because it had not been given yet. But they said whatever this says, even though it has never been written even, whatever it will say in the future, we agree to. So that's a much higher level of nullification. And he says, so this causes the mind to be able to unite, or at least to connect with the infinite light above the mind. He says normally people are intelligent, so we follow our intelligence, we follow our mind. But our mind can only carry us so far until we come to that which is beyond the mind. And we want to come to that which is beyond the mind. We want to penetrate beyond what our intellect tells us. And so by doing this, we are uniting the mind with that which is above the mind. Now he's going to give us a beautiful, beautiful definition of this in a moment. So this causes the will that is above the mind to come down into will that is perceived by the mind. Of course, he's talking here about the revelation of Mount Sinai, that by saying Naseh v'nishma, they drew God's will down, as it were. Okay? As we'll see in a moment, it's even more than that. וזה עניין עושים רצונו של מקום, פירוש שעושים לו רצון. This is like what we say, איזו אישה טובה שעושה רצון בעלה. A good woman is one who makes her husband's will. So people translate this, it's meant to be translated as, who follows her husband's will. But in Chasidus we know that it means something else. What is a good woman? The one who makes the will of her husband. Meaning, by being nullified to someone, I awaken in them their will. It's like when I hear, look, here's an office, and here's someone who will be your assistant, and they'll do everything that you say. Suddenly I have a million ideas what I want to do. And my will starts coming out. Because there's somebody who's going to perform it. Somebody who's going to do it. It makes it easier for me. And by the way, if I don't have any will at all, it'll last exactly 5 minutes and it'll be over. Because I have nothing to give them. But if I'm a person who had a tremendous track record with will, with a person who has tremendous achievements prior to receiving this, who do you give an office like this to? You don't give it to the people who don't do anything and say, oh, this will awaken them to do something. You give this to someone who's been getting along without that office, without that assistant, and has been producing copious amounts of work. And now you say, okay, so I see that you do this. This is how real philanthropy works. I see that you've been getting along without my help. I haven't given you any money. I haven't supported your cause. But look at what you've done without any support. I know that I give you resources, assistants who will help you fulfill the will that you have. It'll bring out more from you. So we draw down the will. But here it was absolute. It wasn't like God until now had done what? He had created the world. Okay. He's not going to create more of the world. Not by the Jewish people saying, we will do and we will hear. He created 2 more worlds. No. He said, this world that I have is a very nice starting point. What I really wanted was my will to be performed. In the world itself, in nature, you don't see that. I mean, people live through their lives without Torah, without revelation of God's will. They have a good life, and they live normally and whatever, but they live naturally. The revelation of the Torah is coming and saying, I'm going beyond nature. It's not just what you want to do, it's what God wants you to do. And that's a whole different level. I don't need to create another world. I just have to, within this world, discover something much deeper. So they made God's will, as it were, by subserviating themselves, by submitting themselves, and saying, whatever you will us to do, we will. That created the will. It didn't just bring it down. What you're saying here is, it didn't just exist before and we brought it down, we revealed it. This is much more than that. We created it. We deserve the title Osin Retzono Shel Makom. We made God's will. Not because we made it up. Because it's like God wasn't willing to express his will, to bring it out, to even have one, to even dream of having one, until someone came and said, I completely submit myself to your will. So whatever you tell me to do, I will. היינו שלמעלה מהרצון מבחינת אור אינסוף, ברוך הוא בעל הרצון, יומשך להיות רצון פרטי, זה תורה ומצוות. So the one who is the master of the will, the one who owns the will now become the one who is giving his will over as the details of Torah and commandments. שבאמת אור אינסוף ברוך הוא למעלה מהרצון, ואינו תופס מקום אצלו כלל. Because God himself, when we call him the infinite light, what we mean to say is that he's above will also. And will is not, there's a place where God, he'll get to this in the continuation a lot more, but there's a place where this will that we call that this is what I want, that this is not what I want, is nothing to him. Because he's so much more than that. Will is just an expression of one way and not another way. But really at his source, in the infinite light, it contains everything, all the ways. But to say, this is what I want you to do. I want you to make tefillin this way. In fact, I want you to even wear tefillin. I want you to put these things on your heads and on your arms. That itself is a limit. That's a coming down from the infinite light into a state where I actually want something from you. And that's lower. It's considered to be lower. It's not higher. He had to limit himself in order to begin to express will. כמו שכתוב, אם חטאת, מה תיתן לו? אם חטאת, I don't remember the verse. אם חטאת משהו, and then ורבו, I don't remember which verses he means, the third one I remember. אם צדקת, מה תיתן לו? If you do many actions, what have you given him? He doesn't need your actions. That is referring to the infinite light that's above the will. But once God gave the Torah, he invested himself in this will. And now it's become that when you do something following his will, it does do something. There is an effect from it. But before the Torah was given, it didn't make any difference. You could have done this, could have done that, it was all the same. וכחשיכה כאורה, and it says, like darkness, like light. בשני כפים, two likes. Two comparisons. What does it mean? שגם האור שווה לחושך. That darkness and light by the infinite is all the same. There's no difference. אלא שעל ידי ביטול דנעשה לאור אינסוף בעל הרצון, המשיכו הרצון דפרטיות המצוות. But by nullifying themselves to God's will, they brought down this detail that comes into the commandments that becomes God's will as expressed. וגם כי אין זה בדרך העלאת מן, מכל מקום הרי הוא בדרך כלי לקבל. And even though this is not the normal method by which we cause an awakening above, because how do you cause an awakening above? By action. You have to act below to cause an awakening above. They didn't act. They only nullified themselves. They didn't do anything. You could say maybe, the lips curving to say the words na'aseh v'nishma, to say those words we will do and we will hear. So that was a little bit of an action. But really, the core here is not an action. They didn't do anything. Right? It's only not even a machshava. It's a state of being. They're nullified now to God's will. Still, he says, there's another way that things come down when you become a vessel for them. If you become a vessel for something, then it comes down. ושיומשך מאור אינסוף בעל הרצון להיות רצון פרטי, שזה עניין עושין רצונו של מקום. And that is called to make God's will, as it were, to bring him down into the state where he wants to express his will. It's as if he never had this will before, because there was no one to come and say, I agree to whatever you say. I agree to whatever it's going to say in the user agreement. I don't care what it says. So then he writes up a user agreement, because now that they said they need something, so you have to write something up. Okay. So good Shabbos, and we'll continue next week. Chodesh. Chodesh.